There's always a time when I'm not really wondering what is going on because I'm not the guy. I'm Brodor, and this is Why We Game. This episode's guest returning, Pete Petrusha, creative director at Imagining Games, brilliant game designer, and arguably one of the most attractive people in all of tabletop. Pete, how are you?
I'm so glad to be back, Brodor. I missed your face.
Oh, now it is skinnier. The pandemic, I've lost quite a bit of weight, man. I'm down well under 200 now.
I'm sure you're making your listeners envious because most of us have packed on the pounds.
Yeah, well, and I've said this on previous episodes, but it is hunk, chunk, or drunk. It seems to be the three directions that people go, or some permutation of. But yeah, when I cut back on quitting alcohol, or when I cut back on quitting, when I tried to not drink calories, made all the difference in the world. And then I started, doing weights, not because I'm trying to get cut, but because my doctor said, you're old and you're fat and it's never going to get any easier.
Wow. We started off dark, Brodor.
Yeah, no. Well, because we're going to go to such an, ironically, we're going to, via Forged in the Dark, we're going to go to some very light and delightful places when we talk about Chew. But
I like the redemption foreshadowing we're doing here.
Thank you.
We fell into the abyss and we were forged in the dark.
Yes, yes.
Rising from the ashes.
No, it's true. And in my mind, I have this image of a phoenix, but it's not a proper phoenix. It's Pollo, right? Like, coming,
it wasn't Satine Phoenix.
coming, flaming from the deep fryer, Pollo is back, reborn from the grease. Any which way, those are just some deep cuts for people
from the grease. Unfried.
There we go. So anyway, there's just some deep cuts for people that don't know what the fuck we're talking about. Anyway. So, Pete, you've got a couple very exciting things to talk about. First and foremost, you're doing the Chew role-playing game using the Forged in the Dark system, and you recently had a very successful Kickstarter. Let's start with, when did the Kickstarter launch and how well did you crush your goal? Because I understand, if I read correctly online, it is the most anticipated role-playing game of 2022.
Yeah. So it was great. We launched in October. It was like October 4th or 5th. Ran its 30 days or something, just into the beginning of November. We did like 760%, if I remember offhand. I got it pulled up over here, but to find it on the fly. But yeah, it did amazing. We unlocked like 18 stretch goals because, I guess I like giving stuff away. I thought it'd be fun and exciting to always have something around the next corner. So we just smashed through those. I think day one, we were like stretch goal 12 or 10 or something. So it got kind of ridiculous because we kept updating the little banner with like 10 smashed, 11 smashed, 12. And then it's like, okay, this is getting ridiculous.
So what came first, Forged in the Dark or Chew? Why did you say, oh no?
The chicken or the egg?
Oh, God damn it. I'm an idiot, man. What a fucking moron that I missed that low-hanging fruit. Jesus Christ. No wonder I don't get traction in the industry. No, but seriously, what indeed came first in the design aspect? Were you thinking, I want to do a Forged in the Dark game, or the opportunity to do the brilliant comic book Chew came across your lap and said, fuck it, what am I going to take and shoehorn the CHEWniverse into?
So I actually had I had barely known anything about Forged in the Dark when the Chew deal started. And I absolutely told the creators of Chew, John Layman and Rob Guillory, at least on 2, if not 3 occasions of video conferencing, we will absolutely not use some other game system. We will make something whole cloth, because I'm of the game design philosophy that you make to the medium, you make to the theme, you make to the vision of the product. What is this about? Good example, Dream Chaser was about, gamifying visualization and goal setting, right? So like, I want you to see success in whatever it is you care about. So with Chew, I was like, okay, how do we hit notes. It's like so funny, but action packed, but has like a police procedural, just had all this stuff going for it. Yeah. Around the time I was doing the Rest in Pieces Kickstarter, we were still, Mitchell Wallace helped me bring this deal together. He has a company called Penny for a Tale. He did a very successful Kickstarter last year, Necrobiotic, and he's a co-owner of Weed the Tale, which is really popular. So anyway, pitching Mitch. We just had multiple conversations, and for months, Mitch and I were just like throwing, mechanics at each other and ideas for things that we wanted, and just kind of spitballing, like a long brainstorm session over the course of months. And it just so way after is the short answer. Way after. It was almost an afterthought. It was not in consideration at all in the beginning. And I knew some things about the system, but hadn't really played it much. So Chew led me to go run Blades in the Dark, read Blades in the Dark, read Scum and Ability, read Band of Blades, stuff that had been sitting on my shelf. I even talked to you about Band of Blades because I knew you had liked it at the time. So I was asking my friends about their experiences, and we just saw some cool things with Forge in the Dark that like started hitting the notes of things we were trying to make stuff up for Chew. And then it actually panned out, which is a glove that fit. It's the OJ thing. Like, what? It actually fit? Like, okay.
That glove always fit. I could do the same thing, right? I could go upstairs, go get a glove out of my pocket and do that exact same bullshit thing, especially with some leather that had been shrunk. But any which way, I don't need to digress and get into conspiracy theory. But what I will say is that I was very confused by Forged in the Dark. Even with my passion for Band of Blades and the 40K hack that I so desperately want to do with that, right? I want to do Astra Militarum, or what old people call the Imperial Guard. I want to do that game, but in the 40K universe so much, especially now that I understand the rules. But dude, it took me a long time because Forged in the Dark is unique. Everything, the action economy, everything for the most part that the game master's doing in the game, it's all revolving around a single die roll, or a single number, right? And you have to negotiate both sides of that roll before dice are ever picked up. And I didn't get that for the longest time, how to play.
I think especially if you've run a lot of games, and like you and I, we've been playing in the hobby for so long and run a lot of games, it's harder for us because they're spelling out things that you do that no game ever spells out. So, they spell out position and effect, which is just basically when you go to make a roll, the GM talks to the player of like, oh, I think that you're talking about this level of risk, this threat level. And if that's what this is, I think you'd have great effect or a standard effect. Or I think you'd have limited potential to pull that off without what you're doing here. And it forces the game master and the player to have that conversation so they're on the same. And it also allows the player to choose how they're going to attack any possible action. Like it doesn't force you to fight or stealth or talk in a situation. You tell me how you want to do it, and then I'm going to tell you how I'm going to judge it. And then you continue or you don't. You change.
And that is something. It is. It is very weird. And that is something that I didn't understand. It's interesting. You go into a game like that, and it assumes that you know what a role-playing game is. Otherwise, you wouldn't be picking it up. But what it shouldn't assume is that you've played a Forged in the Dark game before. And so for me, what I needed was a section of, role-playing games, this is great, but let me explain to you why this is antithetical to the gaming tradition that you've been steeped in for 3 decades. Or more than 3 decades. Yeah, what's that?
Just as a tangent, it's strange because there's some new thought, and maybe it's not new. Everything in this industry is cyclical. But there's more and more designers who are like, I'm not trying to teach you how to play a role-playing game. I'm trying to tell people who already know how to play what this game is. And that is a growing theme. It seems a lot different than when I was growing up, and every RPG book had that section of like, this is what a role-playing game is, and this is what people do, and this is what a GM is. I have seen more games than the indie side stop doing that. And they're doing it because they're like, hey, the people who play this game, they're not going to fight in distribution. They're either kickstarting it or finding it at a convention. Those people know role-playing games enough that they can pick this up and learn. anyway, just throwing that out there because it's weird, right? It's different than what we've grown up used to, but there is more of that going on.
Right. But you're excluding a market of people who have been conditioned to play in a certain fashion, who may not understand your game and say bad things about your game and influence other people about your game because they were ignorant. And a simple couple pages of saying, this is how we've changed the paradigm, old man, would have been super helpful to me.
Now, did you say that there was that in Band of Blades, or that there wasn't that?
That there was not. No, not that I found, but in Band of Blades in some way is much more clear about the rules than Blades in the Dark is, and vice versa. So having read both, I've literally annotated, I don't know if you watched my review of it, but I've literally annotated my copy of Band of Blades to make it work for my conditioned brain on how gaming used to work and how this game is very, very different. But anyway.
I do know, like you said, I hadn't played Forged in the Dark games or Blades in the Dark before I ran it. So I do remember reading that over and over and then Googling and trying to make sure that I was getting it right. Because like you said, position effect, which GMs a lot of times kind of do, right? Like we kind of already do give them a lot of games already ask you to talk about outcomes. But yeah, it's weird, but I think it's good. One of the things I thought about it that was good for new people, especially as you're telling me to make sure we explain really well, is that it's telling game masters more accurately maybe how to run games who don't know how to do so. So I looked at it from that perspective that, you know, as a person who's been running D&D and other games for so many years, it's a little harder because you're like, oh, why are we breaking this down? Oh, because it's tied to the game mechanically. But I think new people, like, we don't, you know, I was listening to Jim Pinto talk to you, right? And like we talk about, hey, pacing, but it's kind of like it's just thrown out there almost like, hey, there's pacing, it's important. There maybe you need a 3x structure, go. Like one page in a GM section.
Right. Yeah, because I don't get it. I need those aids. I do.
Yeah. And position effect is gone into so thoroughly, which is just GM and the player having a conversation about making sure they understand what's going on in game terms, that I think that's great. And I have seen at the table that clearly when players get good at it and GMs good at it, they kind of just, that's risky, that's standard roll. Okay. Like it gets really quick, but initially though, it's definitely slow.
Well, and here's the bitch of the bunch is that the math is very simple. If you have a standard effect, it's 2 ticks on the clock. Lesser effect is 1, greater is 3. Super simple, right? But then you have to take into consideration scale, quality, tier, and all these other conditional factors that affect either side of the roll. And then the PC gets to tick little boxes off of their character sheet to then alter in either direction to mitigate harm or to increase effect or whatever. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. I just didn't get it for the longest time. However, because I'm such a huge fan of the CHEWniverse, I loved those comics, not just the art, not just the writing, the universe, the creation, the camp, the drama, the heartbreak, the tears, right? I love that journey. And so I was like, well, I spent money not only because I love Pete, but I don't know, Satan himself could have made... Well, I mean, shit, we already deal with the devil. We do this industry does tons of business with the CCP. So whatever. The point is that I was going to buy this damn book, right? And if I'm going to buy this book, I'm going to play it. And if I'm going to play it, I'm getting all the toys and accoutrement and I'm going to fucking play this game right. And so if I'm going to do that, I better understand the existing versions of the game.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, just hitting that point that you made it earlier, it's weird how it's a one roll system, you know, for the most part. It's just got this one thing to wrap your head around, but that one thing's big. There's a lot of little fiddly bits to it, like you mentioned. You could have scale and there's 3 options of how they might enhance the roll, and there's just so much going into the one roll. But that's the game, like 80% of the game, you know, that one roll. How do you do things?
It's absolutely wild. But what I do want to drill down into, I assume at this point, people no longer care about the Forged in the Dark mechanic wank and are curious what the hell is CHEW. So what I would
Sure.
like to do is I'm going to ask you 2 questions before I forget them. First, I could give a dissertation on the CHEWniverse and what I loved about it, but you're the guest. We want to hear it from you. So can you
Yeah.
tell us about CHEW? And then can you transition to what about CHEW are you doing differently in Forged in the Dark to make the CHEW version of Forged in the Dark feel different than existing versions, but also to make it feel like CHEW?
The first part of the question, we'll hit you with the quick pitch just to give you the broad overview, right? It's a foodie crime drama. It is about cops, crooks, cooks, cannibals, and clairvoyants, and it's based on these award-winning New York Times bestselling. It's a police procedural. It's got elements of a buddy cop thing going on, but it's wild and crazy and action-packed. So what is CHEW? CHEW is, as John Layman would say, is always 5 years ago. It's modern, but with twists to our world that change everything. So in a modern setting, if you could imagine recovering from a pandemic, right, but of the avian flu kind, the response to a bird flu that killed over 100 million people in the world was that we began to police poultry. We actually made it illegal. The consumption, the selling of it, so chicken's gone, turkey for Thanksgiving is gone, and it becomes the most important thing to police in the world, which changes law enforcement as we know it. The FDA, and closely followed by the USDA, become most powerful law enforcement agencies in the world. And stuff like the FBI and the CIA are almost non-important anymore. It's all the resources of governments around the world are poured into policing chicken to end the pandemic as an overreaction response to it and so on. But this is also a world that had food-powered criminals. As in, people have mutations like the X-Men, where they have food powers that are based on either cooking or eating a specific food and then having some oddly specific weird power form. Like maybe you can cook really fast, or you can spit seeds out like a machine gun out of your mouth if they're sunflower seeds, or the title character could eat something and then see its origins all the way through to the beginning, which is horrible if you think about it, because like you eat a hamburger and you see the cow being killed and the fear they had in their life and so on. And it gets wild and zany from there. Obviously, it's filled with food puns. The law enforcement agencies you work for are above the law. They have like endless resources. You can kind of get away with murder because who's going to stop you? And it's a world where there's strange writing in the sky. There's a rooster superhero. There's cybernetics that are formed out of this endless budgets that are just poured into NASA and USDA and the FDA. So they have like cyber technologies that they're building. And then you have the backdrop of almost these Dr. Evil sort of villains that are having unique food powers. So in a nutshell, it's zany, it's weird, it's funny, but it's also very dark. It's one of those series that it never broods. Like the characters have fatal flaws where they run into the problems or they find they're overconfident and they find some reason that they can do it. A lot of times they can because they're the FDA. They don't have to like follow all the rules. They just kick in the doors and show up. But it's a series where people get their arms cut off, people die, sometimes ruthlessly, shot in the head, a cleaver thrown at them. And the reason this is important is that it keeps you guessing. For one moment, you're like laughing and you're smiling and it's heartwarming and all the characters just keep growing in this series and more add and all the chemistry and it's bouncing and sometimes moving like Game of Thrones to characters in the series. And you start seeing how they all connect and their interrelations. But you're always having that moment where you're like, it's got that Kirkman effect. But around every corner, you don't know if anyone's safe.
You read my mind. I was going to liken it to the comic book Invincible. I loved Invincible, and Invincible had that light, fun, young Spider-Man, and / Superman teenager coming of age story, but with the power set of Superman. And it was fun and cute, but then juxtaposed with this just heinous, ugly, brutal violence. And I totally agree that CHEW runs the gambit of emotions. It really, really does. But I love the book so much. I love the world building so much. That's one of the reasons that I was inspired to, how the hell do I play this game? Because I want to play Chew. I remember picking up that book, reading about Tony as a Cibopath and what it does. And my very first thought was, when does he eat people?
Yeah, which that's what it leads into, right? It starts off with that theme. What's really funny is I think it's different. Some of the versions in other countries have different names because they don't translate. Like there's no Chew family that makes sense with Chew the word. So I've seen like Detective Cannibale and stuff is like the title, and I'm like, well, that's really awesome. I like that title anyway. But like Detective Cannibal and Homicide something, and just having these terms of how they pitch in other countries. Yeah, this character Tony Chew rises to fame, gets pulled out of the Philly PD and pulled into the FDA Special Crimes Division, because he's one of a few people in the world who has a rare power that's unusually powerful and very useful in this case. Unusually powerful because it leads to collecting other powers. But could you imagine as an investigator, especially in special crimes, like if it was like your TV shows of all these crime investigation shows where you're like, the person could take a bite of a cadaver and then know what happened to them, like whose door to knock on. So he's obviously becomes an ace in the FDA and a total ace parts of him fall out of the sleeve. Very useful and rises to fame. Not fortune. You don't get fortune with the government.
It goes into so many wild directions. I mean, I think that zany is a great word, and usually I fucking hate zany in anything except for the Three Stooges. But the zany that they bring to this universe is really very, very well balanced with a lot of heart.
It's funny. I'm glad you said that because that's exactly what I feel. Is that zany is like this perfect word if you looked at the Merriam-Webster dictionary, but it's not something that seems like in common speak fits. And it's because of what you're saying. It feels sometimes even manic as a comic book because it just has this full range. It has something for everyone. And there's something really novel about that with Chew in general. From what I read and all the research I've done since, Chew became like the non-supers comic. That was one of its big selling points. It was the alternative comic book. It was the thing on the shelves in the early 2010s that like people would go to the comic store and be like, hey, my partner, whether it's male or female or, they're not really into comics, but I love comics. Is there something you'd recommend? Because a lot of times it's like D&D. They're like, I don't really like wizards, swords, and dragons. Doesn't mean you don't like role-playing. I don't like superheroes or Superman or Batman. Doesn't mean you can't enjoy good stories in comics, right? That was one of the places that really made Chew stand out. It was kind of like sitcom in the way, right? It's like normal people in a weird world, weird situations, because it really felt like they were normal. Even though they had powers, a lot of times they're just so oddly specific. Like, cool, the words that you write, if I read them, I then taste whatever you describe. Cool, that's amazing. But like, as a superhero comic book, like, how am I going to use that effectively over and over against bad guys, right? So that's the difference with Chew, is that they're funny and they're unique, but they're only so powerful. There's not many who are like Superman or can fly or have bulletproof powers, these kinds of things. They're like, cool, I can make carrots. I can shoot carrots out of guns with incredible accuracy. Or I can make ninja stars out of tortillas. So
I can carve chocolate into a variety of different useful tools.
Yeah. But like you said, that the relatability, and then you throw in the relatability. One of the reasons we call it a foodie crime drama is because everyone can relate to food. And foodie is a term that we appreciate outside of role-playing games, outside of gaming. Like, we all like food. We enjoy food. What do we do with our friends? We share food with each other. Meals are important at the game table. Like, who's cooking? What are we getting to eat? So even the creators were very surprised at how relatable it was, because they were too busy staring at like, who's going to read a cannibal comic book about detectives that eat people. But then when they realized what the magic was the premise, right? It was like food, relatability, family, characters, storytelling, and then we loved the range.
Everyone can imagine what it feels like to be nauseous and to throw up. Everyone can imagine what it's like to read a food review. Now, put those two things together. And when they introduced her and she had written a negative review about that restaurant or whatever it was, and people are reading
We're
a
talking
review.
about Amelia, by the way.
Yeah, people are reading her review and just in the newspaper stopping and vomiting right on the street. And she's just walking along all cheerily, you know. Oh, it was wonderful, wonderful. So what
Speaking
are you?
of that, right?
Oh, sorry,
like
please.
The popularized family is an Asian family, which is really cool. There's even a great story from John Layman and Rob that was like when they pitched the comics originally, they were told you cannot have Asian people as the leading family because Asians don't sell. And even in comics, they were told. It wasn't like they were told this for TV yet. They were told this for comics. Asians don't sell. What about CHEWniverse? That literally was something that I was told, was mentioned. It was like, what about CHEWniverse? Which is hilarious, especially now that we've gone full circle a decade later. That Hollywood would practically is begging people to have Asian leads right now, right?
Right.
But a dozen years ago, they wouldn't sell. Tony Chu, the lead character, clearly Chinese, and the family, multiple members of the family are brought in, get spotlight. It's also the women that get spotlight. Like it's not all completely male oriented. But yeah. You made me think of that because talking about Amelia gets a lot of spotlight. Amelia's a really cool character. Amelia becomes the traditional love interest, right? There's a lot of relationships of all different spectrums in the comics too. I love that they introduce Amelia with like smiles and it's like that distant look of like longing of like, oh, so-and-so's cute. I could imagine myself being with so-and-so if I ever had a chance to talk to that person. And then like when we actually learn more about the person, it's like, oh, they're a food columnist and they're walking to work and everyone's puking, reading the column.
What are you doing mechanically with Forged in the Dark to make the game feel like the CHEWniverse? Because I can wrap my head around it that, you know, we have our playbooks and we have, instead of a crew sheet, we have a group sheet for us as a unit of investigators or a group of investigators. I can grok all that, but what are you guys doing to make the game feel Chew, but also unique to Blades in the Dark or Band of Blades?
There's two things that really grabbed us that are real quick. You know, we were thinking a lot about like evil past power, about, you know, eating food and like seeing the origins. How do you do that in a role playing? Forged in the Dark games have flashbacks that are integrated into the system. So that was kind of one of the thought processes that already exists. But one of the big things that we just kind of touched on was the resistance thing. You love it or hate it, is in Forged in the Dark games, you have this resource. Usually it's stress, or in our game, it's appetite, like your drive. The players have agency in so many ways. Forged in the Dark. That was one of the big reasons of why even that role mechanic is like, the GM talking to the player. Do you understand what you're doing? Is that really what you want? Does this sound like what you're going for? I'm adjudicating. I'm not trying to control the situation. I'm responding to the player as the GM. And that's the kind of role, the guide role that, Forged in the Dark games is going for. Another way to give players agency is by allowing them to resist consequences. The GM can just go down rabbit holes, take it to extremes, talk about how you get shot in the head. You know, there was a sniper on the corner. Our actions led us to the situation. And the player can say, you know what? I don't want to get shot in the head by that sniper. I have so many points left of stress, or in this case, appetite. I don't know how much it's going to cost me. I'm going to roll to see how much it costs me. It may cost most of my resources, but I'm going to do that. I don't want to get shot in the head. And then it lets us describe that situation of how you open the door, and when you walk in, a meat cleaver comes and hits you in the side of the head. We can kind of have our cake and eat it too. I can get dark and gory with Chew because I can do these things to my players, and they still, as players, have the agency to be like, whoa, no, that sucks. I felt that. No, I don't want that to happen. And then choose whether or not it happens, if they still have enough resources. Because obviously, you kind of, as you're getting beat up and bruised and, put in the conditions and stuff, that's how you die, right? Like you run out.
Let me pitch then what I don't like about that. And this is probably my own psychological damage that I should talk to my gaming psychiatrist about. And yes, my psychiatrist and I talk more about gaming than we do about my mental health at this point. But I hate that because I feel cheated, right? Like,
he was the player or the game master?
Was the game master. Like, why did I spend all this time describing this thing that you just deflect away? It's fucking boring, right? And I get it, right? I didn't get it at first. And so the thing that, and I think you touched on it there, is the resource management aspect of the game. Is how far do you want to push? And it's really has a great balance of risk reward where you can put yourself in a much more desperate situation to have a greater effect on the clock, the drama, etc. But it is you then take consequence for failure or mitigating circumstances. And then you have all these things that tell the game master, no, stop it. We're putting bumpers on no, you don't get to hurt me. That, you don't get to suffer consequences. I don't want to suffer consequences. That shit pisses me off, Pete. I hate it.
Well, the flip side is you as the game master don't have to be governed. In almost all the games you're probably running, you save those moments as plot points or story. They're pivotal because you as a game master know pacing wise, like I have to be ready for a player to be character to die, because if I don't, that player may just be 5 minutes in the session and SOL for the next 4 hours. And that person no longer likes me or this game or anything we're doing anymore if they came and they're stuck there for 3 hours doing nothing.
You don't get to come on my show and make a great point. You don't get to come here and tell me that is really an excellent way to sell the game as exciting and new and interesting. Okay.
Right. So every time I want you all session long, because maybe you can pull this off once or twice before it actually happens. But what's great is, every time you do it, it's still coming, and you can only protect yourself once or twice more. Maybe. I mean, if you're all like, shit, no, like you're not. But it lets you know from the get-go, I am never pulling my punch, right? Like at every corner, if there's a possibility and the position and effect fit, there can be a meat cleaver coming at your head. You might lose all the digits on one hand. We can go there.
Okay,
which is the interesting thing about it.
You have just sold me the game. I now get it. Oh, and by the way, Trigger Happy, I know you're listening. Thank you for the message that you sent me via YouTube, your advice about this specific subject. And the Powered by the Apocalypse games is very true. That this game, Blades in the Dark, assumes that you've not just played role-playing games, but that you've played other Powered by the Apocalypse games. So
it's very rude. I mean, it was built off of that. Yeah.
So me as a traditional gamer, there were two hurdles that I had to jump, which was what the F is Powered by the Apocalypse? What is Powered by the Apocalypse, and how is Blades in the Dark different from the traditional dice mechanic of Powered by the Apocalypse?
Do you want to know that?
Well, no, because I learned it on my own, man. But you know what? Fuck it. Yes. Because let's assume that the audience, no, seriously, I don't want to be a dick. Yeah. Sure. Let's assume that the audience that has played a traditional Powered by the Apocalypse game, one of the generics or whatever, who hasn't played Forged in the Dark. Yeah. What is the distinction?
So the real quick short of it is that, so there's different dice. The dice in Forged in the Dark, you roll a dice full of D6s. You only need one guy to have a certain result, the highest result is the one you want. And in Powered by the Apocalypse, we're going to have the same outcomes in both cases here, but they just rolled it. Powered by the Apocalypse, roll 2d6, and you add them together. And then the numbers, depending where they land, whether it's below 7, 7 and 9, or 10 and above, tells us what the outcome is, positively, with a catch, or negative. So the point of that whole storytelling thing there was that, like, it's no longer this binary choice of like pass-fail. Pass-fail sucks. And like we've learned, like pass-fail sucks. It shouldn't be in any games anymore, ever. It's old technology that's dumb. Because it's much more interesting to succeed with failure, because that leads things forward. Where fail too oftenly says, oh, I didn't pick the lock. Now what do we do, guys? You want to try? Well, that was wasted time and annoying, and like it's just the game master fiddling with the thumbs. It's like, okay, let's roll till we succeed. Why are we even rolling for this? But it also lets the people who then have, if there's a success with a catch, that failure can be bad, right? It tells the players, the game master, like, it's not like, oh, it didn't work. Make it interesting. Move the story forward. This is no longer an option. There are new obstacles. Things get worse. That's the general die mechanic thing with the two systems. And you could see that inherently is the same in both, in the way that they have three outcomes. Both game systems kind of like having prescribed benefits that happen that might be thematic, but Fortune in the Dark prescribes like in general terms and gives you a lot of options of how to build what happens. So Powered by the Apocalypse often says, hey, if it's 10 to 12, you do this damage. Or if it's 7 through 9, you can pick one of these three options. So Powered by the Apocalypse a lot of times gives you what options you have in those adventures. Fortune in the Dark will often be like, okay, this is a complete success, da-da-da-da-da. This is a success with a catch, so this is going to happen with that. A number of consequences of this level. There's moderate consequences, minor consequences.
Sorry, I had to turn my mute on. My dog was barking. My co-producer, as I call him. Oh, are you leaving? Okay. I love you, babe. Alrighty. Bye. My wife's taking my dog to my mother-in-law's for doggy daycare for my buddies coming over for Gloomhaven because my dog is a colossal asshole. And recently my wife and I were talking and I was like, why is my dog such a fucking prick? And everyone adores him. Without missing a beat, she looks at me dead in the face and she's like, I wonder where he learned that. Anyway, now that I really have a better even understanding of the distinction between the two mechanics, the boiling it down to a single number on a single die is significantly more elegant than even the 2d6 system, right? I don't have to do the math and blah, blah. Yeah. I just grab a pool of dice. I pick my highest one. If I roll more than 1 6, yay, I crit, right? But
yeah, Powered by the Apocalypse usually has modifiers like +1 to +3. So you're very minimal, right?
Right.
But yeah, seeing Fortune in the Dark, kind of the rules, light, indie movement, going forward, technology, game design, building, right? Like we like removing modifiers. We like removing math is really what we're saying, you know?
I get it. I just didn't get it at first because it's so alien.
Everything used to be target numbers.
Yeah.
Everything was target numbers. But sometimes, I mean, I've been playing the Strange to pick on the Strange, but Strange has got a lot of this, like the target numbers 3 times, whatever this thing, you know, it's just like, why are the target numbers determined by a multiplication, like ahead of time, you know? And then a lot of games, though, will then, I don't know if it's sensible, better or worse, will just be like, okay, well, at 12, it's this, at 15, it's this, at 18, it's this, like D&D, right? So it's just the target numbers that are just abstract told to you like a chart, just more to remember. More that's there that just doesn't seem like necessary, you know? So we're definitely seeing a lot more game systems lately that are like succeed on 5, 6s, or 8, 9, 10, you know, that kind of thing, like count your number of successes. But
yeah, which is not a new mechanic, right? I mean, that's been around for a long time, but for most games, the distinction for me is this. A traditional game, we almost take for granted both sides of the roll before the dice are ever picked up. We assume the condition in most cases, and we certainly in almost every case assume the effect based on pass fail. And these games don't do that, and that's weird. Yeah. And in addition to taking that away, you completely remove action economy, and then you boil both of those concepts down to one number between 1 and 6. Oh, and by the way, you have to adjudicate both sides of condition and effect and consequence and outcome and blah, 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 all before we ever figure out if it's a 1 through 6, right? Just blew my mind. But anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, and they give you terms, right? Just everything's like one of, is it, are you in control of the situation? Is it a risky situation, or is it a desperate situation? Okay, what's really neat about that is actually how, when it's a desperate situation, the player knows. And they also know that like the number of consequences when I roll 1 through 3 of failure have multiplied and the severity is greatly increased. So it's just a very interesting thing once the player knows. They're like, oh, it's in control. Even if I fail, it's not going to be that bad. Maybe I'll get to reroll or I have to try a whole new avenue of doing this. But like, so what? But if it's desperate, I mean, it's basically telling me if a 1 to 3 is my highest roll, I crit fail because it's going to be really bad, all kinds of bad shit.
No.
But I chose the risk of I might crit fail here, right? Like
the idea that every bit of risk reward is in the hands of the player is wonderful. The fact that every mechanic to propel narrative is also in the hands of the player. And so I feel like as a game master, I am oft sitting on my hands and not participating in the game. And I think that has completely to do with my style. But anyway,
Another great reason of why you can literally throw lightning at your players, right? Oh, they can resist. Like,
right.
So that you maybe think of like you could throw a meat cleaver at some character's head because they're not doing anything.
Yeah. At the time of this recording, I have not run my last 2 game sessions of the Fear the Boot actual play, but dude, I'm so excited to do so now that I grok the game. I'm really, really excited to see what I can bring to the table, and particular to make one individual at the table suffer and expend resources. But anyway, what is different about Chew from other Forge in the Dark games, like mechanically? Like, do I have a different crew sheet? Do we have an agency sheet? That kind of stuff.
So I didn't want to miss the point that you made. That was one of the cool things that we're leading into is that because I know I have these 3 positions of risk to put players in, I can also make character, we call them perks and things. It's another thing I can game design to, because what's important is I want people in a comic book game where I just talked about, a lot of times these characters walk straight into risks because they have fatal flaws, like they're overconfident or they're cocky or they're dutiful to a flaw. Some characters, like we have different types, different playbooks, which kind of like classes, depending on what kind of game. Are things like the hot shot. We want the hot shot to be brash, to be crude, to walk into problems. So we can game design abilities to doing things that are desperate, doing things that are risky, to incentivize the player to not take the in control action, to describe actions that are risky. And then when their game master says, nah, that sounds risky, then be like, no, I'm looking for desperate. How do we make this work? Because I know that if I roll desperate and I succeed, something else will explode, and that's funny, or whatever the case.
Well, and in the traditional mechanic, in regular Blades in the Dark, if you roll from desperate position, you get an experience point tick on a particular track that skill is rooted in to hopefully increase those types of skills in the future. So it rewards you for being in desperate, which makes the game more exciting, certainly for the game master, because there is more consequence and harm I can throw back at you.
Yeah. So with Chew, just top to bottom, like I mentioned, we changed stress to appetite because it's your appetite, your drive, for your motivation for finishing the case, taking it all the way through. The characters don't have the 12 to 16 actions that normally you see in Forge in the Dark characters. They're kind of like their attributes and skills mashed into one. In Chew, we made 4 basic attributes that are all stylized to that police procedural, almost noir sense of character. And we went with instinct, guts, charm, and training. And with these 4 stats, they'll have a rating of usually 1 to 3, but maybe 4 eventually. That'll be how many dice they roll when they go to do something. And one of the reasons we did that is because we thought it was important to have, because we're going to bring a lot of new people to the hobby and a lot of new people to Forge in the Dark. So it's also a game where we imagine in anything thematic like this, we'll play a really great one shot. And we wanted it to feel like, okay, it didn't have as much to master, right? Like to immediately get in, because that's just not the kind of audience we have for this. Not the audience that Chew has, honestly. It's like Chew, every issue felt complete. Every story arc, trade paperback felt complete. There is always a broader thing going on. That's one of the beauties of it. Like so many things you read, it's like they're leading you on and on and on and on. And you don't know if the payoff's going to be there. But Chew was like, everything was like, oh, well, I wonder if that's 3. You're as a reader, like 3 issues from now, we're probably going to resolve that. And it's like, boom. And you're like, whoa, that happened. Like they weren't worried about the next issue and the one after that. Like he just always gave the coolest shit as soon as possible. But just like hit you over the head with. So you have that the powers. What's interesting is in a game that could feel like superheroes, as a core mechanic, you felt like the superpowers are the core most important thing your character. But in Chew, they really aren't. We found in so much playtesting that because they're oddly specific, if you can cook really fast, or if you can make mashed potato golems to be your drones or something, it's really cool. But like, you have to go get mashed potatoes, like, or explain why you're always walking around with a tub of mashed potatoes. You got to open and scoop them out, throw them on the ground, and make sure. So we realized that Right? Like in a storytelling game, this became something we called sport, and we moved to the narrative. We're like, do it as much as you can fit it in the game instead of this once per session kind of bullshit. Because people couldn't figure out how to do it when it was so limited. They just didn't use the powers. They're like, no, do it as much as you can because it's weird. It's funny. It's ridiculous.
That is ridiculous. And the thing is, I really, as a general rule, I hate comedy.
Mashed potatoes.
No, I love mashed potatoes. They make me come alive. But anyway, no, I hate comedy in gaming because it's so dumb and people are bad at it and they're not half as funny as they think they are. And it's often cringy, particularly at cons. But if I know that there's going to be zany in the game and I'm playing it with a close group of friends in the privacy of my own home, and there is an understanding that there will also be emotional extremes of joy, terror, fear, and loss, I'm in, right?
Yeah. So, the best part, and I've kind of, we talked a little about Rest in Peace, another game we'll talk about later, I guess. But the thing with comedy is at least my perspective, it's the situation. Because like you said, this medium isn't about scripted lines and us having perfect punchlines and timing. And some players will have that. But like the expectation can paralyze players and game masters too. But how Chew solves it is you have weird things to try to take advantage of and weird situations and strange bad guys and a freedom to do whatever it is you want to do. Because like even as an investigative game, where you're cracking a case, like there's a crime to solve, you are still the most powerful law enforcement agency in the world. And if you want to frame the hot dog vendor for the crime, you can do that and crack the case and it's over. So because it's just not, it's your oyster, right? Like,
right. Cause I'm going to frame not only the hot dog vendor, but then I'm going to,
it's always the intern.
Yeah. I'm going to abscond with his hot dog cart. Right. And I'm going to steal it right from evidence and no one's going to care because I'm super powerful. I'm the fucking FDA. Right. That's what the F is for. Right. So anyway, and then I'm going to turn it into my mashed potato rickshaw so that I always have hot, fresh mashed potatoes for my golems. Yeah, no, I may not be able to take it inside buildings, but I'm always looking for a service elevator. That's all I'm
So
knowing.
if you're the expert playbook or the wrong, you come with like a van or something. You just wheel out your cart with your vendor cart everywhere you go. It's like instant mashed potato.
Right. And that's what's brilliant about
That's where the comedy comes from. Right. It's that. Well, you're like, oh, what do you do? And what do you do? And everyone's spitting out some ridiculous bullshit. Or they're saying something. You're like, why would you do that? And then the next thing they do, oh my God, you were setting up this, like, why do you have the hot dog cart? Oh, because I've been stashing mashed potatoes in it, flashback, it's stocked, all ready to go. I dropped the sign on the front of the hot dogs and now it's mashed potatoes. Why did I do that? Because it's just funny. I thought it was silly and hilarious to do. So, yeah.
No, I completely agree. I think that the system honestly is brilliant. I think it really can do just about any genre, provided that the players or the people participating in the game aren't looking for a deep mechanical wank. If you want a mechanical wank, this is not your game unless you get deep into the other areas, like in Blades in the Dark, building your crew. So I assume that as I alluded to earlier, with Chew, what's our crew sheet?
Crews originally started with different factions because one of the things we have with Chew is we have, we already do have over 70, maybe over 80 factions at this point, but, we have 60 conflicts in mind. So there's all kinds of like bad guy gangs and villains and criminal organizations and mega corporations and hitmen. And so the idea was originally, one of the things that's super neat is that it has a police procedural base of working for the FDA and the USD and so on. But like once we already working on 2 books, right? So the CHEWniverse kind of expands that to like, let's open up the world. The core game was meant like, hey, you're going to be agents of the FDA or the USD or NASA, right? And the FDA is so powerful, they can just like kind of commission experts and pull in people from other agencies, make these ragtag groups. But when we opened it up to, what about if you want to be the criminal? What if you want to be like basically the Power Rangers, which is like Jello assassins, right? Each of you is a different colored power of Jello, right? Like you can do that And it just turns on its head the basic mechanics. What are the goals of, like, now we have obviously a target instead of a suspect. There might still be, instead of a most method, it might be like the mark, like the routine, where they are, trying to figure out where we do the hit. So flexibility in what kind of characters you can be. We have basically team abilities that have been built. I'm not sure if we've wrapped around the name of, we haven't stuck with crew because there's a lot more things that are like work related that we've been playing around with. Originally it was faction related. It's still up in the air of exactly how we're going about it, because we had faction mechanics of like, okay, well, like at the end of every mission case, right, like performance rating, because your boss is important to you, which you would know from the comics, right? Like if you didn't have an overarching supervisor and have that feeling of like, God, work sucks, it'd be wrong. Like the Chew, you always have someone higher than you that somehow is a big part of your life. They're probably really your super villain, right? Because they can force you to do shit you don't want to do. But yeah. So every group kind of has a supervisor of some kind fleshed out as an NPC of note, because they create more troubles for the character. And there's something that we are gamified because you have to report back to them, and at the end there's a briefing and debriefing. So every game kind of starts with a briefing in some case, some way or other, and then ends with a debriefing where you kind of explain yourself and you get rewarded with XP. But yeah. So right now there's just abilities that are tied to characters. They're more group related instead of faction related, because we also like the idea of we don't want players to feel stuck in a faction. Because some of the good stuff in the comics too is we get demoted, we go to traffic, and we come back up and get reinstated. And we don't want any of that to feel penalized as a character, like that penalizes your character sheet. That should be role playing and narrative and interesting, right? Like storytelling, not anything that you feel like, oh man, my character got demoted, you know?
With Chew, are you rotating between a cast of characters? So, for example, I know that you can in Blades in the Dark, and you certainly do in Band of Blades, rotate between a larger cast of characters, and some people enjoy that and some people don't. With Chew, is the intention to play one character always, or do you rotate people in the office?
Yeah, so right now the idea was that it'd be, you make your character, right? So it is something individualized, it's personalized. And we have these playbooks. There's 8 that are the core. Tony's the inspector. John Colby is the hotshot. Amelia is the expert. Olive is the prodigy. Mason is the wrong. Caesar's the veteran. Antonelle is the mascot. So we have a cool assortment. And you can see one of the things that we also did was all the playbooks are more personality driven. Because again, in comics and with the character chemistry we saw in the comics, we wanted to make sure that like these playbooks aren't, while they're role related, they say a lot more about like the attitude of the character. And we thought it's more important that we not only need to build chemistry with the characters in the game as a party, because we need that aspect of what also makes Chew sing, but also to let players know like what kind of character you want to play. It's not that you're so much rooted in like, oh, I'm a rookie or I am an FDA agent. Anybody can be these things. And kind of piggybacking on that, maybe the most important thing on your character sheet is these 3 approaches. Because every time you go to do something, the GM and the player are supposed to look at these 3 approaches like I'm an egghead, or I'm 100% raw. They're all food related. I'm vanilla. And think about how the world reacts to you being these things. Everything that you do, if you're 100% raw, you say everything that's on your mind. You don't hold back. You have no filter, right? So even when the player's trying to tell me about how they have a filter and they're being very diplomatic, the game master is then going to use the position of effect to play against them because, like, yeah, but you can't hold back anything. I mean, or when it's to their advantage, they'll have this to lean on. But again, from the get-go, having a character that you can fall into, know who they are, play to them. Other characters can play to your character because they know these things about you. You're dark and stormy, which is like, kind of coffee related, right? But that's, you're the brooding, steaming character and so on. But also something that makes you affect the world in that way. So everything you do, because we have this position and effect system, there's already a couple of qualifiers that your character has walked into everything.
It spells out levers, that you can pull and buttons that can be pressed, etc., from the get-go.
You get an automatic benefit and hindrance from them, right? To play to them, it's a benefit. Play against them, it's harder. But and then you can lean into them to get your extra die benefits. Usually you can push in other games like Blades in the Dark, spend stress. Well, we spend appetite. We call it dig in. You dig into one of your approaches, making sure that your description explains why it's helpful in the situation, and that's why you're the extra guide. But yeah. So the characters, that chemistry, the playbook.
So there are gaming
Did I hit the
foodies.
question?
You did. There are gaming foodies, right? So when are you guys going to produce some sort of Twitch stream where you have some well-known or quasi-celebrity chef who is also a gamer making food? So it's you, John, Rob, maybe Morgan or Mitchell, whomever, and you guys are hanging out and you're playing Chew for charity, of course. And we're watching you guys do this while you're having great food prepared.
Well, there was actually just a thing they did, but I don't know when this will air, but it was February, right around the beginning of February, with Leave the Tail, they did for the Trevor Project. And there was a pretty popular chef, Mike, I don't know if Hackett or Hackett. Anyway, and if you look, Chef Mike, but we have a chef to pull from. We were really excited because we did do for the Kickstarter we did a whole bunch of streams, but Leave the Tail did like a 10 episode season, and Mike first came up at that point because Mike was supposed to play, but then scheduling conflict. That's a good one to go back to because every episode had like certain foods because they went to different nations. So they did like an international theme, so they were able to like pick up on like popular foods for different regions, and sometimes they would show cooking of it because the game master always dressed as a chef, and it was a lot of fun. But yeah, I imagine we'll find even more cooks. Clearly, it's hard because like it'd be amazing to do that when we're in the same place. We can smell the food, we can touch it, we can eat it together.
Oh, right, yeah. You're all in studio together, but then you stream it.
Yeah, getting everyone logistically, as you mentioned, in my team right there. Like I'm in the Midwest, Bitch is in Baltimore, Morgan's up in New Hampshire. The creators are down south and southwest, and the good part is if I had everyone everywhere, it'd be a gem. So that's been a routine talk. I'm sure at one point John Layman will be at an Imagining Games booth signing Chew books eventually. Just a matter of when.
I can't make any promises about being at Gen Con this year, but I'm super interested in taking you up. I saw that thing about, hey, do you want to come Game Master at Gen Con? I was like, maybe I do want to come Game Master at Gen Con for Pete, even though I hate playing with strangers. I might do that. Yeah.
Yeah, you're always welcome.
Yeah.
But you might be busy working a booth.
Yeah, well, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
I've always had that angle too.
Yeah.
You're moving though, right?
Yeah, we are. That's a story. I'm not supposed to talk about it on the show for all sorts of reasons. But yes, the intention is in the next few months, the house is on the market and we've got some land out west, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, I don't know if I can make Gen Con happen. I need to actually start taking that very seriously very, very soon if I'm going to make that happen. But if I do, I wouldn't mind throwing my hat in the ring and demoing some Chew, assuming that's going to be a thing.
And don't forget that, and you need a PAX Unplugged couch sofa booth.
Yeah, no. So yeah,
interviews.
So that actually is I've been planning on already, kind of plotting out the shows for the year. But I definitely want to do that. But I don't want to get too into it because I don't think that's very interesting for the audience right now. But what I do want
I can talk more game mechanics if you want.
What I really
no,
want
I'm just joking. I'm more interesting,
Yeah, no, I do want to talk about Rest in Pieces though. I want to talk about that game, which is out. It's available. Prior to the recording, you and I were talking about some plans you have for Rest in Pieces and yada, yada about getting it in stores and things. But I would like to understand what is Rest in Pieces and why should people as gamers give a shit?
You should give a shit because it's like Fiasco meets like Dread. It's this wonderful amalgamation of like what gaming can be, and it's very relatable. So it's easy to get new people to play. It can play in like an hour. So to have a game also in your repertoire that you can just be like, let's play Rest in Pieces. You know what it's like to be a deadbeat roommate, right? And a game that's certainly going to make everyone laugh, hopefully not cry, and possibly scream in horror. But that's not here or there. Rest in Pieces, you play deadbeat roommates that share a pad with the Grim Reaper. It's a game, about bad days and
Pete, you keep
difficult
laughing like that.
roommates.
I'm going to wonder which one of us is high.
I'm just excited. The game uses a 2-color Jenga tower.
Well, okay. Well, here
I know which one of us is high.
Yeah, let's
okay?
pump the fucking brakes on the two. All right. So here's the thing. Let me get back to this because Pete's way too stoned for this interview. The thing is that it uses the Jenga tower and if I can lift the phrase from Justin Gary, the core tension of the game is that you are taking actions that either are in favor of you selfishly or are in favor of the group collectively to benefit in the situation. So you all live together. Your landlord is a shitbag, whether that shitbag is the Grim Reaper himself or Charon the ferryman or D&D's dungeon master, but a bit of 70s smarm and penchant for professional wrestling. The point is that all actions are driven around either the card mechanic where you're fucking each other with these cards, just fucking each other, but you're trying to collect blocks like you're collecting dice in Fiasco. Now, here's the thing. There is a secret game design mechanic that Pete, to this day, I'm asking you now, Pete, I promise I will not divulge what it is, but am I right?
But am I right?
I want to know right here and now in this public forum. I want to know the answer to the secret where no one else gets to know. I want to wield this power, Pete. Am I right? And by me, I mean the guy at my demo table who pointed it out.
I'm just saying that rest in pieces. It's a game about screwing your neighbor, right? Like, it's not being a difficult roommate. So it is a game that is a little less cooperative, possibly a little competitive. And there are a lot of mechanics in the design and the game system that are meant to incentivize you to be antagonistic. And there are 2 color blocks that you pull from the tower. And the light colored blocks are when you're being selfless, and the dark colored blocks are when you're being selfish. And it seems like the best indicator of being a deadbeat roommate is usually when you're just not thinking about it. So it's important.
Okay. All right. That's all the answer that I needed. But so it's a great game. And I don't just say that selfishly because I wrote the Game Master expansion, but it's really very enjoyable for people who either want a break from a traditional role-playing game, right? If you want a palate cleanser, or which I think the greater market is for people who are interested in role-playing games, but really have never dipped into that arena, or people who are really into board games and they want a cool game that you can play in about 60 minutes that is very fun, that has some really cool mechanics, some great cards, and just a wonderful atmosphere. And so if you're into stuff like Rick and Morty or It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, those kinds of shows, I think that Rest in Pieces definitely fits that market, right?
Yeah, and every, have unique scenarios that are just you pull flat. Like the core game's got 14 unique scenarios. So it's got a game for you to play different each time. And obviously, if you run role-playing games, every game is different, even if it's got the same premise.
So Pete, I have to
tell you
how
much you can do with a roommate situation.
Oh, right. Well, and how much can you really just dump on people? And when I demoed it, I don't think that I probably didn't sell well enough to people that, hey, you're roommates, yes, and you have amicable and mutually beneficial relationships, but you really, the crux of the thing is you fuck each other, not right. Sexually, but you screw each other over with regularity in this terrible situation that keeps escalating through the course of this 24-hour period. Yeah.
I need to survive, and if I have to climb up your face to get out of here, I will. Thank you for the boost as I stick my boot on your face and jump out.
I think that is key, is that people must understand that it is self-serving. But speaking of self-serving, Pete, having some exposure to the industry, and I know that we want to sell Rest in Pieces. We want people to be excited about Chew. Now, I know the Chew Kickstarter is closed, but I believe that there is a way to support Chew or get Chew despite the fact that the Kickstarter is closed. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's currently on GameFound. So GameFound, if you're not familiar, is kind of like Backer Kid. It's a pledge manager. So you can go to GameFound.com and search Chew the role-playing game. Chew, fill in the role-playing game. I think if you type in Chew, it finds it anyway. Or you can go to my website, imagininggames.com, and it's in the announcement banner at the top. But yeah, you can go there and you can actually pick up any of the fudge levels still. One of the big things we're pushing is that there's a special edition set that will have holographic covers that all of the little panel pictures in the background will be images from the comics that the design team picked out individually that we thought were cool things in the story that will be signed by the Chew comic creators. So you get Rob and John's signature on those, and they come in a slipcase. And you get like the bucket of chicken dice that's fashioned after the Mother Cluckers chicken brand in the game. The game and the book. And you get an investigative corkboard that's dry erase that folds out for you to plot out who the suspect is and the method and the motive and who our characters are and so on. Get some exclusive pins. But this will be the last time you do that whole package with the signed special editions, because we're only going to order as many as we can for the pre-orders and the backers. And then the hardcovers will also be probably exclusive at this point because there's so much of a demand for the soft covers in the comic side of things, because they'll line up really nice with the trade paperbacks that people collect comics with. So the hardcovers also, because they're slightly larger, are going to be limited to this. The buckets of chicken dice corkboards will be limited, but the hardcovers and the special edition sets, this is it. You order now, forever hold your peace, right? There'll be a couple retailer backers, but I'm sure that they're going to have some pretty high prices as those go to eBay or something. So, so go to GameFound, check it out, see what you like, and it's as cheap as $39 if you just want to get in at the bare bones level core book and PDF. So for a licensed product, that's the
$157, Pete. That was the level.
That's the level. That's where you get everything. You even get limited pins that we won't have again, a foil, exploding. It was a secret weapon foil. Everyone knows the famous drop from the sky secret weapon in the case. Press this button only if you need to.
Yes, blood, death, mayhem, destruction. Poyo.
Your own FDA badge so that you are a true agent.
It's so good. I'm so stoked.
I want to tell everyone, get it now, because you're going to see it. You're going to be like, oh my God, this is incredible. And for those people, like if you see Rest in Pieces or you backed it, I mean, like, the production will be great. Like everything's already been good, and I have even more money to spend on this.
When does the GameFound program shut down? I'm
telling people April. As people know, with everything these days, everything's a little wishy-washy. But April's the sound bet. I won't close it before April. You open those things early, one, because it takes a long time to find all your backers, through email and stuff. So, not everyone's checked in, especially Kickstarter mess. But also, I have to close it at a point at which I know how much to order of it. So that's the reason you do it so early as well, right? But yeah.
So then when do we see the game?
It's promised August, right? So backers will get it. And as you know me, backers will get it before it's in stores, unless there's a supply chain crazy COVID-related thing. But yeah, I try to make sure my backers have it and my retailers have it. So, and so far I've been, the COVID thing just screwing me up. I'm like, I'm always on time, except for COVID, which is not always anymore. So.
Yeah, it's brutal. I mean, but so many people in the industry have been screwed by shipping delays and what have you. And now that we're seeing I don't forget what they call the type of manufacturing, but that last minute manufacturing, the whole thing that's caused the chip shortage. Demand, basically. Yeah. Well, now we're seeing it with all sorts of stuff. Like we've got some snow here. I don't know how bad it was in Chicago, but it was bad, yeah. Yeah, well, dude, my neighbors across the street are from Kenya, right? And so here I am, French, Canadian, German. By the end of my driveway, it's blue jeans, a t-shirt, and snow boots, and they had to look at me and go, "God, that's what they were born to do."
I can't imagine.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. But any which way, was it bad up there? The snow?
Yeah, I think it was. 12 to 15 inches, something like that.
Jeebus.
It was a lot. I was fortunate. I didn't really have to leave the house, but yeah, it was a lot. And there was some expectation that it, a lot of us were just expecting, it won't be as bad. They get it wrong. It was bad.
Yeah, no.
But we haven't had that much this year. So I don't know about by you, but we haven't been hit that frequently. And sometimes it seems like it's just pounds of snow up there forever.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get into a political thing on the show, and I don't know about global warming or what causes it. But what I can tell you is that as a 47-year-old man, it is not as cold as it used to be in the winter, and it does not snow like it used to. I don't know what that means, but I can tell you that that is a fact.
You're going out west. You're doing it right.
Exactly.
Get away from it.
Yeah, so let me ask this though. I'm gonna move before Chew comes out. Where do I put my new address? How do I change that?
You're gonna put it in GameFound. That's
Okay.
what I'm gonna use.
Perfect. All right, I love it. Because GameFound is
out those reports and
gotcha. Because they asked me recently.
hand them off to the next person. Like, hey, you take care of this. Go ship these to everybody. Speaking of that, plug for Greater Than Games. That's the plan. Is that Greater Than Games? Popularized. They made Sentinels of the Multiverse that really put them on the map. But Spirit Island, like they have all kinds of hits. They're out of St. Louis.
Yeah, so they're locals here.
They, the plan is that they'll be shipping to them, so at least domestic. We have partners, in other parts of the that and other things. Crazy.
All right, Pete. Well, last question, because the industry, you are either, you're evolving or dying, right? So there has to be, for Imagining Games, a project that is already on the boards, being designed, being talked about before the Chew project goes off to the printer, because you just have to constantly be working on the next thing. And anyone who doesn't accept that in the industry is a fool. You're a fool. When 5th edition D&D came out, they woke up from the launch party that next morning covered in feces, urine, and vomit, and they were just like slathered in cocaine and THC resin, and they were like, okay, we gotta start working on 6th edition. It's just fucking true. So anyway, what's next?
So we've had a couple of games that have been in the works for a while that people know about. So Memories of Tomorrow is definitely coming up pretty soon. I don't know if it'll be the end of this year, but that was the plan originally. Memories of Tomorrow is kind of like Inception meets Mass Effect.
Did you say Movies of Tomorrow?
Memories.
Memories of Tomorrow. Okay, I'm sorry. I had old man hearing issue.
No problem. Yeah. So Memories of Tomorrow is, God, it's a mind trip. It's a game about why people do things. And, why in pivotal moments in people's lives do they choose action A versus action B, especially in moments when like everything about this person you would assume would make them pick choice A. And then they change the world by going the other way. So it's a game where the characters conceptually have memories that have given them unique experiences that the players kind of think about because they're popular, they're important on their character sheet. And one of their attributes is what drives them that are prioritized. Like, are they driven by like a sense of duty? Is it personal achievement? Is it the logic of things? Like they want truth overall? Is it their heart's bigger than the rest? And when they go to do things, they succeed more or they have a higher chance of success based on how much they give a shit, right? So it's kind of like that's the motivation. Is like, do I give a shit? Well, that's what I roll. And then the memories there allow them to have reroll choices like once per session and things if they pull in their memories. But it's like this thing of like, will that change who I am if I had this car accident in my life? If I had one teacher who raised me up? If I had to save everyone but the person I love from the planet? And what those choices will do to go against the drive is what makes it so beautiful and interesting. But the game, you play Seekers, and this is kind of cool agency ripped from different places all over the universe, and they have this like almost cult sort of existence, and the planets, different weird planets, like scream out, and they hear them in their dreams, and these planets pick out people based on their experiences because they can't speak to them, it's like they can relate to them based on a prior experience. So it's this real weird tricky game, and you get pulled to the planet, and then you get a little bit of an idea of what's going on based on this mini session of that like foreshadows elements of what's going to happen to the adventure based on you interpreting it through one of your personal life experiences that's usually traumatic. So it's weird, it's wild, and then the whole game leaves you guessing because you're playing through the adventure. You're like, there was a lot of clouds and there was all this rocks on the ground. What does that have to do with this civilization that's going on? And how are we going to stop that? There's always like some reason that the world's about to end. So it's crazy, it's wild, it's fast, keeps you guessing. It's really, really neat. definitely not for everyone, right? Because it's such a mind trip. But
yeah, no, that is a very, I don't want to be douchey and use the art term avant-garde, but that is the first thing that popped into my head, that it is this really unusual interpretation of a role-playing game. And is it more therapy tool than it is game?
No. If
Okay.
anything, clearly we've run it for people, like also because if anything we've been more worried about that line, like being too traumatic or triggering, right? Like that kind of stuff. Because you're making pre-gens and running, con events and stuff, play tests, and clearly you picking up a character and then working through their shit. If it's too much, right? So we've had a lot of wild stuff, and so far it's really bordered horror. But yeah, we haven't. But I'm sure it's to come, right? Like a game like that, it's inherent. Not all traumatic experiences, things that mold you, are bad. But like we know, even from social media, God, you remember the bad more than you remember the good, right? So anyway, that is something that's been in the works for now a couple of years. That started right when COVID did. It kind of was a COVID baby project. Couldn't see anyone make any. You didn't feel you would get any reward for making stuff. So it was kind of like it's something to pass the time. We've had a long running project that is therapeutic, which was with Project Dream Catcher, which is the solo play Dream Chaser. It uses some of the elements more specifically for like therapeutic gaming. That was actually designed more with the mindset of actually being used by like spiritual professionals and psychological mental professionals, right? We realized with Dream Chaser, one of the things we said ambitiously is like it could cater to all these audiences, do other things, but a lot of the audiences don't want to adapt something. They want like, give me the thing that works for what I'm doing. So we've been working on giving them specifically, here's a tool that you can use that's game therapy, that's cool and interesting, and we think has benefits. And clearly that's not a money thing. That's more of just a cool thing of kind of fulfilling a promise, kind of what we've been trying to do with that. And then, like you said, there's a couple of those mysterious behind clouds, like things in the background that behind the fog of war of what really is going on. Because after Chew, what's the money make? Where's the thing?
Right.
So some people know that I haven't been shy about talking about how I really want to make something Castlevania with polymorph. So that's been a personal, more interesting project. But there's some hints in there with that.
That's the level 9 games?
Yeah. 9th level games.
Man, no, it's one of the 23 commandments of 4. Don't mix dairy and baby.
That's Chris O'Neill. That's him. Yeah.
I didn't recognize that.
Yeah. That's him doing Yeet. So I got to interview the puppet. Sorry that started out too loud. I didn't realize the volume. I'd fucked it up. But any which way, yeah. So really, you want to do something with polymorph in Castlevania? That's slick.
Yeah, and we've had some talks, but I've just been so there's a matter of. But like I said, there's some hints deeper in that.
And I assume that
to be concluded later. Right.
It would not be like one of the tiny, business wizards or,
No, yeah. It's funny because I'm like, me, but it's not saying anything. I would totally produce it. We'll see what happens. I'm really excited we say that, but like, if you know polymorph, you got the base idea of the system where it's kind of like one die represents your character throughout all the acts. But, beyond that basic design, I could go wild.
Before we go, you've got big plans for convention season this year?
Yeah. We did them last year, and everything seems, knock on wood, to be even more solid the schedule this year. So a ton of events for Gen Con, Origins, PAX Unplugged, Midwest Tennessee Anime Convention, and yada, yada, yada. If you're looking to go to conventions and you're interested in volunteering, most of these shows, I can find ways to get you a free GM badge and other perks, upgrade your pledge or give you some free swag, some games and things. If you want to run some of our games, we have Dream Chaser. I'm talking about Mary Tomorrow. There's Teases now. We've got Chew. And maybe one or two other things for playtesting. I've been repping Infected, Australian-based game, zombie horror. And and you mentioned too, we're really hoping Nurture Hope comes out this year. So that could be another published product. That would be a partnership. I'd publish it for penny for a tale. But kind of think maybe like Lost Boys or like Milk Carton Kids. like kids lost trying to find a way home.
When you said Lost Boys, I immediately thought about vampires.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
That's just where my brain went. Well, Pete,
River Phoenix.
Yeah, and the freaking the Frog Boys. Oh my God, and Saxophone Guy. That's one of my favorite little memes you see on the internet. All right, Pete. Well, I have to go because I have to vacuum my house because I'm a house husband and people are coming over to play Gloomhaven and I have to vacuum. So I have to go back to the real world and have to escape from gaming. But it has been an absolute delight having you on the show. Thank you so much. Do we want to pimp your Instagram, like where you're shirtless, and talk about where people can just watch you do stuff around the house wearing nothing but an apron? Where's your OnlyFans, Pete? That's what I need to know.
I was still thinking about how you have to go, like, you just have to go off and suck. That's what you said. Like,
dude, I went to Board Game Geek to look you up and see what was on there, and it was nothing. So of course I flip over to RPG Geek and look, and there's the little bio that I assume that you wrote. I don't know who wrote that, but I'm going to assume it was you.
Somebody wrote it. Yeah.
Well, did you see the pictures they chose of you? It's the classic beautiful Pete that I'm going to put as part of this episode. I'll put it in the show notes, which is fantastic. But there's another great, like, sort of almost halo, like sunset illuminated. Yeah, no, just go to RPG Geek and type in your name, Pete Petrusha. It's delicious. There's two wonderful. Well, anyway, Pete, I got to roll.
Somebody actually went back and added more. That's the best part about it.
That's fantastic.
Rodor?
No. It wasn't me, but whoever the mystery person is, they're my fucking hero. Pete, seriously, I gotta go, brother. Thank you so much. Ladies, gentlemen, folks, humans, etc. This has been Why We Game. Music by 99 Instrumentals. Audio editing by me. Your jack-off material for Pete's picture will be in the show notes. Spread that like your seed.